My goal today is to talk about foreign entrepreneurship in Japan and how is it possible for non-Japanese to actually make money here and create companies and basically do business. So I thought I'd share with you a sort of a mix of both my personal experience and also just some rules of the game, basically. So I'd like to start out by asking, how many people here have a plan in the next, say, 10 years to make your own company? I'm so happy. One of the things that is, I think, stereotyped about MBAs is that people, target large companies and want to stay there until they retire. Nothing wrong with working for large companies. We need them, especially for energy. But at the end of the day, 90-something%, maybe 97% of Japanese, and certainly in the 80s and 90s elsewhere in the world, of people working, in a regular job, are working for small companies. And most of those small companies are established by entrepreneurs. And if it wasn't for entrepreneurs, we'd all be out of work. So, and certainly the tax office would have a lot less tax to deal with. So I think entrepreneurs are actually important for society. I've actually established enough companies that I've lost track. Even this year we established 4 or 5 companies. The weird thing is, although I don't look Japanese, I've been here for 25 years and I've never established a company overseas personally. I've hired other people to do it, but I've never done it myself. So sometimes when I sit down at a boardroom table and have a discussion with either a client or a target that we want to take over, they look at me and their frame of reference is, oh, you must be familiar with American business or New Zealand business or whatever. And actually, I have no clue what they're talking about. So I had an interesting experience. About 3 years ago, I invested in a company in New Zealand. And I've always thought that if you write a proposal and it's all in writing and everything, that's the way it's going to be. But the experience that I had was that at the end of the day, things tend to slip and change. Now I thought, that does happen in Japan, but once it's in writing, it's kind of evidence. But what I was to learn is that until it's in a contract and written down in absolute excruciating detail, it's not fixed. And so I've learned very quickly that business overseas is not done the same way as it is here. Anyway, so I have a kind of somewhat different business model as a Japanese business person in that I build and sell. And so my first experience in selling a company was in 1995. I went to EDS to try and sell them an ad in a struggling magazine. And they said, well, we're not interested in your ads, but we are interested in this other company you have, which is an IT company. And so 9 months later, we sold the company. It's at that time doing about $20 million of business. And we sold that company to EDS. So I won some notoriety locally here in Tokyo because A, it was a big company, and B, foreign entrepreneurs don't sell companies, not for profit anyway. And it opened my eyes. It made me realize that well, first of all, somebody would pay for, all that blood, sweat, and tears. And then secondly, how they pay. And my eyes were opened in many ways. Like, for example, EDS told me that they amortize the cost of the business out across a 5-year period. And other companies since that I've met told me 3 to 5 years. So this is obviously a standard in the market. It's a very important thing to know if you're trying to sell a company, because then you make your business plan so that it pays the purchase price that you're looking for over the next 3 to 5 years. In other words, you can help them reach the purchase price. And that's an interesting and important thing to know. If you have no forward-looking plan, then they'll make up the plan, and it's going to be much worse than yours is, and therefore the purchase price is going to be worse. In any case, we did the deal. That was quite successful. Then I went on to form a new company in 1996 called LINC Media, which I still have. And I decided to make an incubator and try to spawn lots and lots of companies out of that. I thought I'd be a media mogul or something. And so in 1998, I started a online recruiting business. Back then, online recruiting was just Recruit, and they only did university graduates and nothing else. There was no, mid-career hiring, and you certainly didn't have recruiters. I mean, they were the worst enemies of everybody at that point. You didn't have recruiters using online recruiting websites. So I broke the rules and I started a website called DaiJob.com. I bought the, actually it's a funny story, but I bought the website domain name, DaiJob.com, from an explorer working for Exxon. And he was like in Java, I think, exploring wherever in the jungles. And so there'd be like 3 weeks at a time when I couldn't reach him while we were negotiating the price. Anyway, I bought the domain for about $10,000 US, and we launched the DaiJob.com. It was a huge success, and within about 2 years, we had about 160,000 users on the site. And in 1999, Monster.com, the owner of Monster.com, was a New York Yellow Pages company. Andy McKelvey flew over in his private jet to try and buy the company, and I turned him down. And the last thing he said to me as he left the room, he was quite angry because he'd just come home before that, and he turned around, stuck a finger out at me and said, "Mr. Lloyd, I'll see you in the marketplace." And that, from Monster.com, at that time a couple of $100 million company, saying that to us, and we were barely doing $1 million, was terrifying. Actually, it was terrifying. But in the end of 1999, I started thinking to myself, what right does this guy come over, have to come over and threaten me and basically say he's going to put me out of business? So I kind of got a bit upset, and I decided, well, if he can think that he can buy me out, maybe I can go and raise some cash. And this was in the middle of the dot-com bubble. And amazingly, DaiJob.com was a subsidiary of LINC Media. And LINC Media's valuation was about $18 million at the time. And DaiJob.com, we sold 32% of the company for $16 million, giving it a valuation of $48 million. I really tried hard to understand how that works. How can a subsidiary be worth 3 times more than the parent when the parent owns the majority of the subsidiary? But anyway, that's what it was like back in 2000. We closed the deal for $16 million in March 23rd. And the market started breaking in April 5th. And they tumbled and tumbled and tumbled. And other companies that saw what we had done and tried to come after us weren't able to get out the starting gate. And so DaiJob had the space to itself for about 2 or 3 years. We spent $7 million of that $16 million on TV advertising that we did concentratedly for 1 month. We ran on all 5 major Japanese Tokyo channels from 10 p.m. to 12 p.m. We were on like at least once every 30 minutes. And we had a famous Japanese entertainer from the 1960s called Ueki Hitoshi doing a remix of a hit that he had in the 60s called Sudara Bushi. And we mixed it with some techno pop, and basically it was a big hit. In fact, it caused a comeback of his fame, and so he became a talk show host for a little while after that, before he passed away, unfortunately, last year. But in any case, it was a very interesting time because here I was spending millions of dollars on TV. Everybody knew who DaiJob was. We had a recall rate in Shibuya of 80% on the street. I mean, the kids knew who we were, and just people were flocking to the site. Contrast that to 2001, when suddenly we had 9/11, and it was all really bad before 9/11, but after 9/11, most of my client base evaporated. So my clients were those who wanted to hire bilinguals, which of course is what DaiJob was all about. And they just stopped hiring for about 6 months. In fact, they started firing. There was blood on the streets in most of the financial firms back then. So our sales as a group went from $15 million to about $6 million. And the number of staff went from 220 staff to 70. So that was a pretty tough time. And I had to deal with the shareholders, creditors, employees, the customers, and my wife. And I'll tell you, my wife was the hardest. So in 2003, she said to me, you know, Terry, maybe you should get a real job. That was very deflating for an entrepreneur. And I have to say that the real mark of an entrepreneur is not how much money they have in the bank. The mark of a real entrepreneur is how they are able to deal with the downturns. Because the downturns are what kill companies. And the downturns are also, of course, what make you stronger as well. Anyway, I decided to tough it out. And what I did actually is that I stopped being a CEO and I started being a salesperson. And it was the best thing I could have done. I learned to be a lot more humble. And I learned that, you know, the people around you are what make the company. So I completely changed my whole business strategy. And luckily for us in 2004, the economy started improving. Suddenly recruiting became popular again. And over the last 3 years, we've recovered the business. And my group actually has just reported a revenue of about $15 million again. So we're back to where we were. But I did sell DaiJob. And true to the model, I sold DaiJob in 2005. And I had a small anniversary in March of this year because my non-compete finished. Or whatever that's worth. So, in fact, I have 3 engineers in the back office working on the next generation of recruiting tools. Not to compete with DaiJob, but to move the next step forward. So, that's another thing about entrepreneurs, they never know when to stop. We're always working on something new, I guess. Another interesting story is in 1999, actually the discussion started in 98. I was approached by a gentleman out of Hong Kong who asked if he could buy my web business. And while some of the other businesses that I was running were doing okay, the web business was actually doing terribly. I mean, we had probably about $1.5 million of revenue, and we lost like $300,000 in '98, simply because the web had been discovered by Japanese companies, and although the demand had soared, the competition had as well. And one thing you learn as an entrepreneur is you have to play niche, or you have to have a product that is patented or something so that nobody else can, you know, come in and take it off you. Japanese companies will compete without profit or even at a loss still. That still goes on. And so I'm always trying to stay 1 step or 2 steps ahead, so by the time they arrive in the market, we're already on to the next thing. Anyway, so the guy from Chinadotcom called me and said, you know, we want to buy this web business that you have. And I said, you wouldn't want to buy it, it loses money. And the guy said to me, no, we have a strategy. And the strategy is that we have to be regional, and we've tried to buy other Japanese competitors of yours, and they won't sell. So we don't care if you lose money, we're going to buy that division. And that's when I learned that M&A is not always what you think it is. It's not all about chasing profits. It can often be a strategic decision as well. So anyway, we entered into a discussion for this $1.5 million company, and they offered me $500,000 of stock and $500,000 of cash. And so I said to them, I really don't want your stock. I mean, who the hell are you guys? And so just pay me $750 and we'll call it quits. But part of their strategy was they wanted to have my name in the newspaper as a partner. So I was locked in for stock, and this was in April of '99. Well, to my amazement, this little company that nobody had ever heard of went on to the NASDAQ in July of 1999 and listed at $250 million. And then, to top it off, by the end of the year, they went for a second offering, and they raised another $220 million. So these guys wound up with $450 million on a story of money-losing companies. which really tells you something about that period. Anyway, from the proceeds, I bought a farm in New Zealand, so that was another good outcome, but totally accidental. So in my M&A experience, you know, M&A is not what you think it is. There's no particular formula, although obviously you have to have your numbers ready and so on. A lot of it has to do with timing and with the people that you're dealing with. And so I now am in the M&A advisory business, one of my many businesses, and I help mainly foreign entrepreneurs sell their companies. And the worst type of client is the one who's in trouble and has to sell in the next 3 months. The best clients are the ones who can take advice and then, you know, polish and maneuver their businesses so that they're well positioned and we can get a strategic investor. Last year, the tables were turned and I actually did my first purchase. And that was of a magazine that some of you may know called Metropolis, which is a free paper. And that's been quite interesting because Metropolis has a very powerful brand name. And what I've been doing is we knew that the magazine was fairly mature and also that it was hitting most of the advertising audience that it would hit. And we knew that the owners wanted top dollar, which we paid. So what we decided is that we would use the brand and turn it into a lifestyle brand. And so the lifestyle, there are 2 types of lifestyles that we can see from Metropolis. One is hard drinking, high hormone, gaijin lifestyle in Japan. And the other one is smooth talking, high spending gaijin lifestyle in Japan. So looking at the hard drinking one first, because it's more fun, or at least it seemed more fun, we decided that the first business that we were going to build on top of the magazine would be an events business. And so at the beginning of this year, we started with a party, a Valentine's Day party. It's called the Valentine Glitter Ball. And we had 6 weeks to do it. And we had an amazing reaction. We had about 2,000 people who wanted to get drunk. It was great. So, you know, sometimes since then we've been approached by various Japanese companies saying, you have great parties, you know, you must have a really powerful theme behind it. Well, the theme is very simple. It's all about hormones. And I told my staff that, you know, if you're going to look at a target market, you've got to keep things simple. And so that's where we'll take that particular business. Keeping it legal, of course, but nevertheless addressing that issue. And then now we've got to address the second one, which is to take the brand up market. And so you'll see some events start to happen around that over the next 2 or 3 months. Okay, so anyway, right now there are 2 groups of companies. There is a group called LINC Media, and that's all about repeatability, very boring businesses, but those are my cash flow businesses. And so we do outsourcing, we do IT, we do back office, we do incubation, and some market entry and PR. And then the other side is all about communication and leverage. And that's called Japan Inc. Holdings. And that's where we put our investments, our publishing, our market entry consulting, our M&A advisory, and all those other things. Now, needless to say, everybody wants to work for Japan Inc. Holdings. But the fact is, you need balance in any organization. And so, you know, I'm quite actively involved in both of them. Right now, there's about 140 people. There would be more, but I keep selling bits of the company. So I just sold another bit in January, actually, a software company. Okay, so I have a personal mission. I think all achievers, or would-be achievers, have to have a deep passion for what they do. And passion can only be fueled by religion or mission or somebody's just plain crazy. And it's hard to tell the difference sometimes. So my obsession is opening up Japan. When I first arrived in Japan in 1983, foreigners taught English, or they worked for big banks and they drove around in expensive cars and you never got to see them. There were no regular foreigners in business anywhere unless, you know, they were kind of kept in a bubble. So, exactly. So you know, well, look, I'm a high school dropout for a start. You know, I left school at 16. I've always been a bit of a rebel, and I decided I would change things. So over the years, although I have profitable businesses, I've always tried to balance them off with unprofitable, but hopefully soon to be profitable businesses that stick to the mission. And so my magazines and some of the outreach that I do and so on is all related to that. So this is what the companies look like. All right, so here's the basic discussion for tonight. I guess I have to watch the time. I first of all want to talk about macro factors of being a non-Japanese in Japan. You know, everybody says that Japan is resistant to foreigners, but there are some quite interesting things to know about how to work that relationship. I always remind my colleagues that basically as a foreigner in Japan, and you can think of this as negative or positive as you like, you're an actor on the stage. And if you don't give a good performance, you won't get applause. So therefore, I just simply forget that I'm not Japanese, because anyway, I'm not. And even after 25 years, I still think like I'm an actor on the stage. What does that person on the other side of the table want me to be? Do they want me to be cuddly? Do they want me to be the window to the outside world? Do they want me to be a sensei? So I just, you know, adapt for the occasion. You might think that, okay, that might make you a bit schizophrenic after a time, but I find speaking two languages is already, you know, contributing to personality, so I don't think that's really a major issue. But anyway, being a foreigner is quite interesting and quite useful. And in fact, for the Japanese staff members here, I'd encourage you to use your foreign staff in the following manner. When I want to attack a large company, let's say that we want to do M&A. As you know, most Japanese companies are not for sale. And so if we're going to have an M&A discussion, we cannot have a discussion by ringing up the secretary and asking for an appointment with the CEO. It just doesn't work. So we have to go in at board level, and we have to have a champion who will give us information and who the gatekeepers are and who the personalities are, so that when we start talking about M&A, we know what to say, when to say it, and who to say it to. So what we do is that we have some young foreigners who are very fluent in Japanese, and we send them out drinking with the staff of the target company as a customer or researcher or whatever it is that is appropriate, and we find out where the hot buttons are. So generally you'll find that after about 9 p.m., whether the person is foreign or not foreign, people will start opening up and telling you what's really going on inside the company. And then again, as a foreigner, when I go in to see the CEO, I will try to find a point that will make that person remember me. Because what I find is that when you're developing a relationship with Japanese CEOs, you have to provide plus alpha to the relationship. It can't be, I want to buy your company, because it's just going to be a negative answer. And so therefore I try to find a point of commonality where they'll start talking to me and they feel comfortable before I come on with the hard stuff that we learned in that drinking session earlier on. And sometimes it's, you know, they've been overseas. Sometimes it's that they're interested in foreign products. Sometimes it's that their parents like Americans or something, you know, I mean, whatever it happens to be. And we work that relationship. And if I can, I'll try and get them out for dinner so that, you know, we can really cement the relationship. And then what we do is that we have the guy who does the drinking bubble up the idea to bucho level, and then I work on the CEO and try to get him to appoint certain buchos to be in charge of the project, which they get irritated about. They hate the top-down requirement. But if they've suddenly got this information bubbling up, it's convenient, right? Oh, what a coincidence. You know, the information we need is right here. And then they can just throw up the PowerPoint on the proposed relationship to the CEO without having to work too hard. I make it sound easy. It's not easy, but if you get your timing right, you can really shortcut about 2 or 3 years off a deal discussion. Anyway, so another big macro factor is change. You can always count on change, and there's major change going on in Japan at the moment. It's really great. One of the biggest changes that I can point to over the last 2 years is the Telecoms Big Bang. And you know, most of us have been looking at e-mobile and from e-access and so on, and how Dr. Senmoto was able to raise $3 billion to start a whole new IT company, well, telecoms company. That's pretty amazing. I mean, I don't think there's anyone else who has raised $3 billion for a non-existent company on the basis of a single deregulation. But what's to come is much more exciting, and that's MVNO, which is virtual voice operators, using other people's infrastructure. And the great thing about Japan is that it's a nation of brands. And so many companies own customer bases, and many of them are looking for ways to milk those customer bases beyond their own products. And I personally think one of those ways is going to be MVNOs. And I think we'll see over the next 2 or 3 years a plethora of virtual telephone companies rising up, which will be marketed out to the client bases. Why? Because already companies know that they have to communicate back to their customers. So what better than to communicate to them using your own virtual phone network, sending emails, marketing, and providing a platform for e-commerce and interaction, which you own and which actually pays for itself. I mean, I can't think of a better thing than to have infrastructure that pays for itself. And then another macro factor is selling in Japan. I find it quite interesting that even now, Japanese smaller companies, which may be doing very well in Japan, are unable to work internationally. So there's just a huge demand at the moment for bilingual consultants, helping companies get technology and either come into Japan or go out of Japan. I started in the market entry business about 3 years ago, and this year we're going to do about 50 companies. We're going to help 50 companies come to Japan, up from 0 3 years ago. And each one of those companies needs at least 3 to 6 consultant months. So that's a lot of consultants, it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of fun. Okay, entrepreneurship. The pioneer experience, I've been through some of this, but I'd just like to share a couple little anecdotes with you which were kind of interesting. I almost went bankrupt twice so far. The first time was in 1986 after the Plaza Accord. And by the way, if anybody thinks that the stock market boom and the real estate boom was caused by the Japanese, I don't think so. I think the Americans were responsible for what happened in Japan in 1990 and 91. And you only need to look at the Plaza Accord and the pressure that was put on the Japanese to revalue their currency to see where a lot of the problems stem from. Now, I'm not saying that Japan didn't have enough safeguards and so on, obviously it didn't. But if you look for the root cause was outside of Japan. I never see that in the press because it's not politically correct to say it. But you're all MBA, so I can say it. Anyway, so I almost went bankrupt after Endaka, 240 to 160. That does a lot of things to the economy. In my little world, that caused most of my clients who were manufacturers to go offshore, mainly to Thailand and Malaysia. So I started thinking to myself, I had a pregnant wife, I'd gone from 10 people to 3, and the bank gave me the last 2 million yen I was going to get. We lost 10 million yen out of the bank account, which we'd been keeping for a rainy day. And that was my first wife, by the way. And I started thinking, okay, high yen, what does that mean? Well, one thing it means is cheap goods in Japan. So I decided that I would go to the cheapest place for the cheapest goods in an area that I knew, which was PCs. And so I decided to go to Hong Kong. Now, China in 1987 was not producing a lot of PCs. I can tell you that. Now, Shenzhen was a little two-horse town, and there weren't any buildings higher than about three floors. And there were 5 cabs that would be up in front of the exit from the Hong Kong Shenzhen border post. I don't know if you've been there recently, but it looks a lot different than it did in 1987. Anyway, I started importing from one of the very first factories in China. And surprisingly, the product was quite good. And so in the following 2 years, I had a niche selling IBM-compatible PCs as the only alternative to IBM. And so IBM sold its PCs for $1 million yen each and had a 5-year warranty. And I sold mine for 320,000 yen each, and I had a 3-year warranty. And some of my customers said, IBM's got a 5-year warranty, how can you compete? I said, you can buy a new one every 3 years, and I'll still be cheaper. But the kicker is that I bought these PCs for $840, which is about 100,000 yen back then. I was making a 200% profit margin on the PC, and I was 3 times cheaper than IBM. So it was a great business, and I sold container loads of these things to English schools and also to people who would eventually join securities companies. All of that changed in 1990. IBM had a skunk works in Tampa, Florida, Boca Raton actually, and they were working on a new operating system which would work on non-Japanese PCs. It was called OSV, and OSV caused a revolution, basically. In fact, it killed the Japanese PC industry because it suddenly meant that you could use an IBM PC, which by this time they were getting real cheap overseas, with Japanese language. So suddenly, in 1 year, my market went from no competitors to hundreds of them, literally in 1 year. So of course, business got pretty bad. But an interesting thing happened. I started getting these calls from people asking if I could maintain some other brand that they bought. There were no one servicing these things. So I immediately stopped importing PCs and went into the servicing business. But I quickly found out there was no one in Japan that could service PCs. So I started looking overseas. I went to Australia, I went to New Zealand, to the US. And then I found, very interestingly, that there were a couple of major universities in Bombay, India, which were churning out PC engineers by the hundreds. And the only place they could get work outside of India was in Abu Dhabi or Dubai. And they weren't well treated, and Japan was exotic. So I went to NIIT and a couple of other schools, and back then I was the only Westerner talking to them, and offered to start bringing Indian engineers in. They jumped at the chance, and we ran our first ad in the beginning of 1990. And I can tell you that we got this many resumes. It's about 2,500 resumes is from here to the floor. And I got a call from my agent in Mumbai, and he said to me, Terry, we have a major problem. I said, what is it? He said, 2,500 resumes. It's going to take me months to go through these things. We needed people quickly. So I told him that we would only look for people who were network engineers or above. And that winnowed it down to about 200. And then I went to India and I hired 2 people. And both of them came from NIIT. And today they're both CIOs of major banks, starting here, but now outside of the country. And of course, we talk about the old times, and sometimes they're clients. So that was being in the right place at the right time, but there's something to be said about being innovative. And from there, for about 5 years, I set up an office in Mumbai, and I went to Mumbai 5 times a year to recruit. And I had a rule, never recruit more than 10% of the candidates. And so I got the best of the best for 5 years straight. Anyway, so we built the business, the PC business. In 1990, it was about $500,000, and in 1995, it was $20 million. That's a growth rate, a compound growth rate of about 85% a year. And I couldn't get financing. So I used to trade on my receivables. I had arrangements at that time with a company called AST, and also with a couple of other vendors, where they accepted 90-day receivables, and I would get my money from the clients in 30 days, and then I'd have 2 months float, which was about $1 million, which is enough to pay the salaries. So that seemed like a good thing, but in 1993, AST called me up and said, you know, we have a little problem. Intel is not shipping any PCs because there's some problem with this new 386 PC. And so for 3 months, I couldn't get PCs, and my float evaporated. So, of course, I was in big trouble, and had 50 million yen of debt coming up in terms of payroll and so on. And actually what happened is that AST cut me off. But amazingly, about 10 days before they cut me off, I got the call from this other company called Compaq, who I'd never heard of before. But anyway, somehow they were in Japan, and they were getting ready to launch this new PC at a very low price. And they said, we know that you're the biggest reseller for AST, which we were, and we want you to handle our product. And I said, $500,000 in credit, and I want PCs next week. And they did it. So we called up AST and said, you will be paid. You're going to have to wait 3 months for us to pay you. In the meantime, sayonara, we're going with Compaq. And so, of course, Vic Murai started off the Compaq shock. We were part of that, and the big guy upstairs helped me out in a moment of need. So, you know, business is all about formula, but at the end of the day, the big changes, nothing to do with formula. It's all about good luck. I want to just make a quick point that, as Robert Kiyosaki said in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, whether there is really a rich dad, of course, is a matter for debate. But anyway, one thing I remember reading in the book, which I thought stood out for me, is that deregulation is the best way to make money quickly as an entrepreneur, because the big guys are too slow studying the deregulation, and it takes them 2 or 3 years to get onto it. And so these are the deregulatory things which have been going on. Now, I mentioned one other, which is Telecoms, and that was outsourcing, online recruiting, and finance. So let's just talk quickly about outsourcing. Not many people know, but before 1990, you could only, this is legally required, you could only have 1 foreigner for every 50 million yen of sales that the company did. And since my company did 100 million yen of sales, and I was in the company already, I was only allowed 1 foreigner. And then in 1990, they removed that completely. That's why I went to India. And so I brought 70 Indian engineers in, and I was able to create a pretty decent-sized company. If I'd waited a year or 2, I would have missed that chance. And so, very important that you take advantage of deregulation when it happens. Okay, connecting Soto and Uchi. I have had a lot of luck with foreign investors, and if you look at other leading entrepreneurs, I mean, I'm not a leading entrepreneur, but if you look at leading entrepreneurs in Japan, what you'll find is that they've all been leveraging the foreign domestic relationship. Now, the best example, obviously, is Masayoshi Son. His biggest deal was purchased from a foreign company, financed by a foreign company, and maintained by a foreign company. So there are not too many Japanese at the critical points. And this is something that you see over and over again. And smart entrepreneurs, smart Japanese entrepreneurs with money and making money know this. And you as smart would-be entrepreneurs should know that. And so therefore what you do, you look for the guys who know it, you use that leverage point, and you sell them something that they need using Soto and Uchi. Okay, just very briefly here, what is an entrepreneur? I mentioned about passion. Passion and obsession obviously go together, and they're not always popular. In 2002, 2003, things were pretty bad for me. And my wife and I talked about what we should do, and she told me to go and get a job. But at the end, she realized that I was unemployable, which I am. So this is after an argument. She realized I was unemployable. So we both agreed that the only other way to deal with it was to reduce our costs. And so what we decided to do is that she and the kids would go and live in New Zealand for a while, which at that time was still cheaper than here, not anymore. And so they lived down there for 2 years, and I would commute backwards and forwards once a month. And that's a very, very trying thing. You know, I mean, being punching Funian is not good at best of times, but when you're removed by 8,000 kilometers, you know, it is a real test. Anyway, she came back for a while, but unfortunately for me, she fell in love with New Zealand, so she moved down again in December. So I actually commute on a regular basis. I travel economy, and I'm already a gold elite on Air New Zealand. So I'm obviously obsessed with Japan. I love Japan. It's a great place, lots of energy. And, you know, staying ahead is obviously all about studying and making sure what's going on. So another one of my obsessions is staying ahead. How many people here get Terrie's cake? Is there anyone here who gets Terrie's cake? A couple of people. Okay, so I publish a newsletter every Sunday that I've been doing since 1997, 48 times a year. It takes me 7 or 8 hours to write it. So my wife hates Sundays. And it's my study for the week. I write about a topic, and I basically study that topic for about 4 or 5 hours. Usually I've been kind of gathering information prior to that. And then I write about it. I send it to about 12,000 people, and if I'm wrong, at least 100 of them will let me know. So I have to be careful to make sure that I actually get it right. And this has been a fantastic you know, compulsive activity to make sure that I stay ahead of the game. So now I'm starting to learn how to connect the dots. You know, what makes the dollar go up, what makes the yen go down, and what makes companies successful, and so on. Another thing I just want to quickly mention is that I would class Japanese entrepreneurs, if you're going to go after them, in 2 categories: the street fighters and the consultants. The difference between the two is the street fighters often fall afoul of the law. And it's quite interesting. Back in 1994, there was a group called the YEO, Young Entrepreneurs Organization. I was young then. And the members were like Origuchi and Shigeta and Hori and a bunch of others. And we all got to know each other pretty well, because the whole thing about the Young Entrepreneurs Organization is that we had to have these sessions where we told each other secrets. And we had to promise that we keep the secrets, so I can't tell you what their secrets are. But it was kind of a good bonding session. And I could see very clearly that there were these guys that were really aggressive and were pushing the envelope. And then there were other guys who sort of like stepped back and were using money intelligently and basically did things more like an MBA would do it. And so I sort of, you know, sorted them out here. So HIS, Hikari Tsushin, and Goodwill, those are all the street fighters. And not surprisingly, many of them have got into trouble, or almost got into trouble. Versus the consultants, which are like Mikitani and Matsumoto over at Monex, who have worked within the system and have intelligently used their relationships. I'm not saying that there's necessarily an advantage of one over the other. I mean, Shigeta is a billionaire again, and you know, so all the more power to him. But for a while, he had to ride around in a bulletproof car, as the rumor anyway. This is kind of important, so I'll just focus maybe a little bit on this. How many people here know Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Hopefully, most people. Okay, this is really simple, and some would say outdated theory. But because it is simple, you can apply this theory in so many different ways. So like, for example, when I meet a client, I ask myself, where is this person operating on the continuum? And if the person is newly hired by their company, they're really worried about cost and cost performance. And so we talk about money. Versus somebody who's been there for a while, is maybe a director level, they're more interested in baseball. And so they want companionship. Versus somebody who is thinking of jumping from their company, and they know I'm an entrepreneur, so they want to talk about starting their own company, which is a STEAM. So I probe, you know, I try to figure out what that client, where they're operating in the continuum, and I have that conversation with them. And that's a very powerful tool, because it creates the bond, it creates the trust, and then the business becomes a byproduct of the relationship. The same thing goes on when you have a salary discussion. Are you talking to somebody who's being underpaid? If you are, then obviously it's going to be very money specific, They don't want to hear about how well they're going to do in 3 years' time. They can't pay the rent. Versus somebody who is in senior management, for them another 2 or 3 million yen a year is meaningless. It's just to make their esteem better. So I'd rather make them VP or something, which is cheaper for me and more satisfying for them. This next one, I mean the diagram's not very pretty, but this is very, very important message. All successful companies and all successful entrepreneurs remember that just like flying an airplane, has anybody here learned how to fly an airplane? No? Okay. You're taught to do a figure-8 scan of all the instruments because, especially if you go into a cloud or something, you could be flying upside down. You wouldn't notice if you were looking at the wrong instruments. It's the same thing about a company. You start a company with a goal in mind, whatever that goal might happen to be. And then the next key thing is the strategic positioning and quality, and then the processes and the resources. Most of us focus on the resources. And then some people who have MBA training focus on the processes, and some of us actually start thinking about strategic positioning. But almost nobody thinks about the goal. And that you have to start with the goal first. $10 million business. So I build and sell companies. So when I start a company, I ask myself, over a 10-year period, how much do I want out of this company? And then I start working backwards to figure out how many people I need each year to achieve that goal. So normally, when you sell a company, you get, say, 5 to 7 times profit if you're doing 15% profit a year. That's just a rule of thumb for selling a company in Japan right now. And so I know, okay, I've got to make a 15% profit by the time I want to sell. And so therefore, and I want $10 million. So therefore, I need a $10 million company, you know, at that rate. And so to get to 10 million, how many people do I need? And within every industry, there is a benchmark. How much can a salesperson make? In the IT industry, it's typically about 3 million yen a month in profit. That's the high end. The low end is nothing, obviously. And so therefore, we can sort of like fine-tune and say, okay, how many salespeople do we need to hit this $10 million? How many managers do we need for them? And how many admin? And then we work backwards at a growth rate of about 25 to 30%. And by the way, 25% is considered a high-growth company in the States. And I'd say it's ultra-high growth company here. So I predicated 30% just to add the spice to this. This is another thing that's very important, is the importance of business plan. So a lot of people think that to make a company, you have to have substance. You have to have the will to create substance, not the actual substance itself. And Masayoshi-san did not have $19 billion when he bought SoftBank Mobile from Vodafone. He had an agreement with a bank that maybe he could have $19 million if he was really lucky. And it didn't stop him from buying the company. And this is exactly the same thing, the same message that you need to have. So when I started LINC Media, I actually sold the first $1 million of web work in 1996 in my pajamas, literally. I sat in my bedroom for about 6 months, not all at once, but basically working out a business plan and then a sales presentation. And I took the sales presentation out, and the first person that I went to present to told me I was an idiot, and so I changed the presentation. The second person told me I was almost an idiot, and by the third time I was meeting the market requirement, and I made $1 million in my first sale. So the Terrie Lloyd rule of thumb for doing market research is to get called an idiot 3 times and learn how not to be an idiot by the 4th time. Team building is really key. If you're going to buy any book that is a cookbook on team building and self-development, this book, The Naked Leader by David Taylor, is just an excellent, excellent book. And it's really a cookbook. I mean, a step-by-step recipe about how to make your life better and how to make a success, and how to integrate that with your staff. And actually, I give this book to all my managers because it saves me having to teach it to them. M&A, just very briefly, there's a major mind shift going on in the market at the moment, and Japanese companies are sitting on huge amounts of cash, and they've done as many factories as they can possibly do. They're not going to share it with their employees because they know there's a black hole, and so therefore they're going out on the guys in their 60s and 70s, which is young in Japan these days, to sell companies. Now, interesting thing is that Teikoku Data Bank has a subsidiary called TDB Fusion, and not many people know it, but Teikoku Data Bank, apart from those tickets that you can buy, which tell you the situation of the company, they have some other categories, other fields that they've been keeping for a long time, which tell you whether or not the company is open to a takeover. And the way they grade that is whether there are any family members in the management apart from the owner, how old the owner is, and also how much, obviously what condition the company is in financially. And it's quite interesting. You can ask them to give you companies that fit those filtered characteristics and come back with 100 targets in any given industry. And so I do M&A deal origination for some pretty major companies, and we use that resource a lot. But when I do deal origination, I tell foreign companies that if you want to buy a company outright, unless it's under $10 million, it's going to be broken. And so therefore, if you really want to get a healthy company, you have to embrace and consume. Which means, quite simply, you put a person on the board after buying 30% of the company, and you have them grind the rest of the board until they get sick of you and let you buy more. And I saw this happen in real time last year. I was on the board of directors, well actually I was a common, but I was on the board and I had voting rights for LiveDoor. And so I was there to protect the interests of the foreign shareholders who own 58% of LiveDoor against a certain Japanese communications company, which owned 12% and wanted to take over the company for $100 million. Eventually, LiveDoor, the assets were dissolved for $1 billion. So I think we did a pretty good job of forestalling that problem. All right, I just wanted to share with you one startup example, which was DaiJob.com. So it is true that I was in the shower and bending down for the soap, and it suddenly came to me that a great name for a company would be DaiJob. So that's what I did. I established a company called DaiJob.com. And of course, the implication being that in 1998 it was not DaiJob to swap jobs. And in fact, there were no MBA courses in Japan back in 1998 either. You had to go overseas for them. So anyway, I wanted a $1 million idea and reached my target in 2 years, so I came up with DaiJob. And it took about 3 months to come up with the program. And basically what I did is I looked overseas. And Monster.com was just coming up and some other companies. And I looked at the Japanese market. And everybody told me that recruiting was keep an eye. And it couldn't be used as media properly unless it was Sotsugyo, because Sotsugyo was acceptable, Recruit was doing it. But anything in between, Tenshoku was really keep an eye because it damaged the companies that people were leaving. And those people mustn't have any morals because they were jumping out before they did their 35 years. And I thought to myself, I'm a foreigner, and foreigners do all the kind of like radical change businesses in Japan, finance and stuff like that. So why don't I do it? And so I broke a number of rules, and in doing that, guess what? All the Japanese companies piled in, and within a year they're all doing the same thing. Anyway, as I said before, the big surprise was the funding. And the second big surprise was, of course, the meltdown afterwards. And so I mentioned before that when I go out into the market, I document the idea and then I go out and sell it, listen to the market. And the way that I develop a new business, and in DaiJob's case in particular, listening to the market means going out and selling. And so I have a personal goal of meeting 20 new people a week. So I understand it's about 50 or 60 people tonight, so it's 3 weeks of my goal, so I want to thank everyone for coming. And basically I have a Rolodex now of more than 18,000 people. Of course you can't possibly send 18,000 Nengojo, you would go bankrupt, so that's why I started the email, and that's been quite successful. Okay, and if anybody is interested in more about what I do, what I think, you're very welcome to sign up for my Terrie's Take newsletter. It's at Terrie.com. Obviously, I got this a long time ago when you could still get your own domain. And also, of course, we have our magazines, Japan Economist and Metropolis magazine. So, sorry, that was a bit long. I don't know if we have time for Q&A.
Yeah, we've got time for a few. I'm sure people wanting to pose some challenging questions too.
Sure.
That, so
I kind of buzzed through it. You can ask me anything except why I got divorced. Yes, let's go straight to it.
Actually, we were based in an Australian company and started off in Japan. He's my partner in Australia. I'm Japanese. We're an ID company, create revolutionary software that solved the point liability. Do you know point liability?
Point
All the airline issued a point. They're not able to ban point.
Right.
We create software.
Right.
And we just create and we want to promote. But
Right.
we don't know how to approach those CEO or director level in Japanese company. Because we are unknown company, even we have a product. I don't know what to do.
So are you going to approach the airlines or?
Airline or IT or even a company who issue point like a big camera
Yes.
or like a phone company, mobile phone company.
Is there an insurance component to this?
Yes, because financial industry, they issue a point.
I know the actuary. I know the actuary.
Yeah, and the total,
big camera.
yeah, and total debt in Japan is 10 billion.
Right.
Worldwide, 130 billion. They don't know what to do.
Yeah.
We create software, but I don't know how to approach a big company. That's the main issue right now.
Well, first of all, this is very interesting because I was, well, it's a huge coincidence actually, because I know the actuary who developed the point system from the insurance point of view for Big Camera and also a couple of other firms. He works for a major insurance firm. Well, he did before he left. And that market, I can even tell you the value of the market, it's about $50 million. A Big Camera, the account alone is worth about $5 million for what it's worth. That's their insurance profit margin. Each one of those companies has decided to take their insurance in-house and form their own insurance company. So where you want to go on this, classically, if it's just an IT problem, I would go to the CIO. And the easiest way to approach CIOs is to simply ask people at the data bank to identify them. Or simply just call up each company and just ask. You'll find them quite easily, especially larger firms. But since I've just told you that they're bringing them in-house, probably you need to go somebody who is on the business development side. In every company, there is a biz dev guy, and those biz dev guys are usually under the Shacho Shitsu, and they have direct air of the Shacho, and they have access all over the company. So they sometimes called M&A, so there might be an M&A department, sometimes they call investment, but you've got to identify that one particular person. And that person will get you in wherever you need to go. So in my personal relationships, like I have relationships at NEC, for example, I go in through the M&A team. And they can get me to any division at any level at NEC because they do it all the time. So that's one thing I would do. The second thing is that you need to know if there's actually a need. Because if there's no need, you're going to waste a lot of time getting in only to find out there's no need. And the easiest way to do that is to go drinking with some of the more junior or mid-level IT folks and just ask them straight out, you know, what do you guys do for your insurance point control? Yeah. So that's what I would do. The problem with airlines clearly is that there's not enough of them. And I mean, really, there's only 3 airlines in Japan, right? There's JAL, ANA, and Starflyer. And everybody else is consumed or part of somebody else. I mean, for the Japanese organizations. And maybe one more I missed, but those are the main ones. So, you know, I wouldn't spend a lot of time on the airlines, and they're really difficult to deal with. I can tell you, I've had IT projects with both JAL and Zenniku, and they're irrationally difficult. So, but the cut-in companies, they would, Denki Sun, so that would be a very good market to target.
I have kind of a basic question. You mentioned that a good way to find out about companies is to kind of go drinking with people and find information. Now, how do you meet these people who are drinking with you? Just hang out at the lobby at 5:30 and offer to buy them drinks?
Yeah, well, each company is a different task, you know. Well, actually, usually I go in through the investment or the M&A person, and then we go drinking with their juniors. But sometimes it might be more broad. If you really want to get into a company, you just tell them how you're going to help them make money. I mean, it's pretty simple. And so that's the discussion you would have with the sales or the kikakubu or something, you know. And, you know, I mean, you have to be creative, but I mean, you know, a common topic might be, I can help you get into the foreign market. I mean, that's pretty simple. Yeah. And then they say, yeah, that's great. And so, you know, you start talking a little bit about how to do it. Yeah. And then you say, oh, by the way, let's go for a drink. And, you know, and then, you know, they'll invite like half a dozen other people, and then you just sort of start working the crowd, basically. Okay. It's pretty straightforward.
It's like, I can help you make money, or I have an idea, let's talk, and then let's go have some drinks. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Right? I mean, you know, you can talk to a person and find out if they like baseball, and you know, go on the internet and check out everything you know about that particular team, and then start a conversation.
Okay.
Yeah. Look in your bag every now and again to make sure you got the names and the scores.
We'll have one more question if there is one. If not, we'll. Yes.
Is there a company that you sold that you wish you didn't sell?
Sold 6 so far, one every 2 years roughly. No. But there's a reason why I say no. One of the core values of build and sell is being able to do it again. And you can't do it again if you get a reputation as being selfish or having run off with the cash. And so I have a golden rule, and that's to share the cash with the key management members of the team. And so in every single company I've sold, there has been at least 1 to 3 to 5 people that have made some tens of millions of yen, in several cases millions of dollars, as part of the deal. And they become excellent word of mouth, you know, kuchikomi salespeople for you for the next generation. And so I have people coming to me who are overskilled, but want to work in underpaid conditions because they know that I run a boot camp that gives them the opportunity to become a partner in the company in a period of 3 years. And I actually do have a program in the company. I have 6 companies at the moment, and I have about 8 entrepreneurs who started off in that boot camp. And one, for example, a Japanese lady, she's 38 years old. She did her master's at Macquarie Uni in Australia. And she started about 4 years ago with about 3 staff. She now has a $10 million business with about 70 staff. And she's going to become a partner next year. So that's a pretty good example. Yeah.
Okay.